everyone. I know it's been a little while since I've done a last video. It's Coeliac Awareness Week, and so I thought in honour of that and talk to you about my journey as a celiac, because I don't think I've shared that really with anyone. Where shall we begin? So I was diagnosed in 2008, probably nearly 20 years, maybe 17, 18 years ago. My auntie, so my mum's sister, was diagnosed with celiac disease, and she had her children tested, and some of them were diagnosed and some of them weren't, actually, because she's got 6 children, and I think 3 of them, I think it was literally 50-50, and so that kind of then, she shared it with my mum, and my mum was tested, and it turned out that after over 40 years she was actually a celiac too. So there was lots of questions then as well for my auntie, because they've basically lived their life up until they were diagnosed with all these issues and problems, and they didn't really know what it was. And then so it wasn't until later on in their lives that they were able to kind of piece the puzzle together. And it actually turned out that my mum did have osteoporosis, or the beginnings of it. She had very, very brittle bones. She broke her foot, she broke her ribs. It just shows that being diagnosed sooner, you can kind of stop these things and help your body more and heal better. But that's kind of like, they didn't know what the issue was, so it's not really as easy as that, but thankfully for me and my cousins, who were then diagnosed because they were, we can kind of work hard to make sure that we live a healthy and bone break free life. But yeah, I was 16 when I was first tested. I had a TTG blood test. That's the blood test that you have in order to check for celiac disease. It came out borderline. So my doctor basically said to me, right, okay, come back in 2 and a bit years time and we'll test you again when you're 18. So I did that. I basically was told right then and there I needed to go on a very, very strict gluten-free diet. I needed to have a few more tests done, so I remember going to the hospital. So I grew up in Wales, and I don't know why and the reasons, but I was very much monitored in Wales, and it could be, I hope everyone has different situations wherever they live, but compared to where I am now, and maybe it's because I know a lot more now, and I've been a celiac for a good amount of time, that I'm not tested as much. But definitely when I was in Wales, even when I was at uni, so for quite a few number of years, I was regularly going to appointments and was checked on, and so that kind of all began. I had an endoscopy probably about 6 months in, and I was told that I'm highly intolerant to gluten. Basically all of my villi, I don't know how people say it, different people say it different ways, villi, I will call it, was completely flat. So the little hairs in your intestines that basically take in all the nutrients. If you have celiac disease, they don't grow, they were flat, and I basically remember seeing an image of mine, and you couldn't see anything, you could just see the lining of my intestine. So that was how severe I was. Funnily enough though, unlike my mum who got rashes and did get quite ill, I only really suffered from bad bloating. I did feel uncomfortable, but I didn't really put it to anything. I just thought maybe I've eaten too much, or I never really thought to myself there's something else wrong. And I do realise now, because I've met so many other celiacs who have really, really suffered prior to being diagnosed. So I do realise how lucky I was to not really feel the full extent to what celiac disease can do prior to being diagnosed. Now you can flip that round and say that that's not really a good thing, because you could easily slip back into eating gluten again. I didn't, but I do understand the people who don't really get much of a reaction. They just think, oh, I really crave whatever it is, that chicken nugget, so I'll just have one, it shouldn't be too bad. So you've got that, and B, you don't really know the extent of what's happening to you, because if you don't feel any difference, you kind of just think, oh, like, am I really, what damage is really being done? But actually, if you're like me and you don't feel a lot of difference, but you have just been diagnosed, or there's something but you're not quite sure, I'd definitely get tested, because the damage inside, and as I mentioned with my mum, the osteoporosis that comes with celiac disease if you don't stick to a strict diet, is far, far worse. It's definitely going to be worth it in the long run, for sure. So let's just flip it back to 8 years ago, so when I was first diagnosed. I was also a vegetarian at the time. I'd been a vegetarian since I was 10. That did bring a lot of issues, because when I stopped eating gluten, I probably did feel unwell before. I was already diagnosed with anemia. I was quite anemic, and I remember the doctor kind of saying I need to have a lot of protein, and I did what I could, kind of being a vegetarian and a teenager. I did what I could. Poor Hugo has known me pretty much since I was diagnosed. He knew me a tiny bit before I was diagnosed with celiac disease, and so he has seen me eat gluten, but those days are like a little faded memory. I remember one of the meals he cooked for me when I first met him, and I went to his house and he cooked dinner. He made an amazing banoffee pie. I love that banoffee pie. It was so good. And I know now there are some fantastic gluten-free recipes for banoffee pie, but back 8 years ago, when that kind of stuff wasn't really around, there wasn't really any let's try this instead things that I knew about anyway. So I'd met Hugo, and we'd decided that after our A-levels we were going to go travelling. So I was pretty much diagnosed, and then we went travelling the following year, and we went to South Africa, Australia, New Zealand and California, and we did the whole touristy travelling thing, and it was incredible. But it wasn't probably the best idea when I was newly diagnosed, because it was all a bit of a struggle anyway. We went to South Africa first, and I got really ill. It was like anemia times 10. One afternoon, one lunchtime, I had a chicken salad. And I was just like, I need to have something. I knew that salad wasn't going to make the world of difference, but it was like I needed to introduce something else into my diet, because what I was currently doing wasn't working for me. So I had a chicken salad, and from that moment I slowly introduced meat. There's some meats that I'm still not sure about, and I really avoid some meats just because, I don't know, it's more the texture and I just don't like it. But chicken, I do eat a lot of chicken now, and it did improve my health. So from that day and the rest of the travelling, I then included meat in my diet, and my anemia suppressed a bit more, so I felt much more energetic. And I think I just kind of realised as I started feeling a bit better and feeling a bit more myself, that I needed to really change my diet. It sounds stupid because I was told I was a celiac months before that, but I guess I was just mentally trying to, I knew what I had to do, and I was doing what I had to do, so I was like just going through the ropes and eating what I needed to eat. But mentally, I guess I wasn't quite there. And it was when we were traveling and I felt so ill that I mentally had the chance to kind of be like, right, okay, I seriously need to change a lot of my lifestyle when it comes to eating, and I need to look after myself. So that was kind of a big moment. Not only was I traveling the world, but I was also just trying to cope with a big lifestyle change. As I'm sure those of you who are watching this who have been diagnosed, it is, you do get hit with a bit of a, oh my god, I need to change my entire lifestyle. That's how it feels. It sounds very dramatic, but it does feel like that. It's funny because I don't want to play it down. I really don't want to play it down. It was very, very difficult, especially back then when there wasn't anything available. Really, there really wasn't. What was available was prescriptions, and they really weren't very nice. And I know now, with everything that's going on with prescriptions and how most places are stopping them, I can't really say a bad word for them, but back in 2008, I would rather just not eat. Like, I lived on rice. Like, I was happy because I didn't want to eat the bread. I didn't want to eat the pasta even. Like, it wasn't nice food. And I think that was probably the hardest bit was, oh my god, I'm going from this to this, and it tasted like cardboard and it had no flavour, and it just wasn't very nice at all. So that was definitely the hardest thing, was trying to replace what I used to be able to have anymore. So it is a shame, because I do know there's a lot of companies that do produce good food that you can get on prescription now, so I know it's a lot better. So yes, travelling, that was a massive part of my diagnosis because it happened so quickly. And then I just kind of rolled with it. I found a little way of coping with it myself, and I went through uni and kind of learning to fend more for myself and cook my own meals, and also the cross-contamination, because I'm meeting my flatmates for the first time and kind of doing the whole introducing thing and being like, by the way, luckily everyone really, really understood. I kept kind of like my own, I bought quite colourful things, and I guess looking back with that was a really good idea, because I had like bright pink chopping boards and cutting knives and like colourful stuff, which does make sense to do, because then it stands out and people knew. If we all had wooden chopping boards, for instance, that would easily just not work. And yes, obviously we washed everything, but it just made me feel better that I had like my own stuff. But we had a Tesco's not that far away, and Tesco's, this was kind of when Tesco's was starting to do their like free from stuff. So that for me was amazing. I was like, oh my god, Tesco's is down the road, it's gonna be amazing. So yeah, it was good, and it did work out. No cross-contamination issues in halls or anything like that. The only struggle was eating out. Still, people now have that struggle. I realise that, even though I truly believe in it's just so much better now. Like, I know it's not amazing now, but it is so much better now. We've come on leaps and bounds, which is amazing, and I love that. And now we're kind of where we are here today. Like, don't get me wrong, there are days when cross-contamination happens. I get massive setbacks. I feel very ill. I guess that is the biggest thing for me, which is quite interesting, is before I went on to a gluten-free diet and I was eating gluten, I felt a bit uncomfortable, but it wasn't much of a much. That's the saying. Now I know straight away, as soon as I have had a cross-contamination issue, I know it. Like, I am really, really ill, so it was quite interesting. I guess that's where my off the scale diagnosis has kind of come into play, is now after being on a strict diet and then it gets introduced, that's where I can see it the most. So yes, I definitely have suffered from that perspective, which isn't nice, but I am definitely remaining positive. I'm lucky that I've never been a picky eater. I've always kind of enjoyed fruit and veg and trying new things, and other than being a vegetarian, and so having to be quite strict in that way, I ate everything. I was never that picky, so I'm definitely lucky in that I kind of just adapted, I guess. I was also lucky that I grew up prior to being diagnosed watching my mum and what my mum did, and so that kind of made more sense to me that it was okay and I could cope with it, which is, I think, what's really important about how we use social media now for the people who have just been diagnosed or are very new to being a celiac, is that they can see people still living a really good life. And that's kind of like one thing that I'm trying to do, especially. I want to kind of share with people that you're going to be okay. And that's what my mum did to me, I guess. I grew up in the house knowing that actually if I did have it, if I was a celiac, I was going to be okay, and I could eat enough things that it's not going to be a big deal. So I was lucky. I was able to kind of see it before having to physically change myself, but it did hit me when it definitely hit me when I had to change. But 8 years on, I am definitely feeling a lot better. I'm still being tested for different things, but I'm coping well, and I'm absolutely loving all of these new brands and current brands which are rocking the gluten-free food right now. And it makes me so happy that we have things, we celebrate things such as Coeliac Awareness Week. Like, that's incredible. So there you go. Thank you ever so much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful. Happy Coeliac Awareness Week. Go and spread the word that being a celiac is amazing and we're brilliant and we kick ass. That's the message we want to give everyone. So thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love to get a thumbs up, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you.